York, unique New York. Here we are. We are live with Sam Pogue. Rhymes with Rogue. We just established. We are in a little bit of a delay, so we might talk over each other a little bit, which I think is fine. It adds a little bit. If you guys find it to be disruptive, jump away, go wherever you gotta go, but that's fine. So Sam was in Boulder, where I'm 10 minutes away from now. I just moved here. I think that was a little bit of where we touched off on, and yeah, tell us where you're at now and all that good stuff.
Yeah, so thank you so much for having me on. Bummed we can't grab that beer in Boulder, especially as maybe things are starting to open up a little bit more. And I got my water. And so, I'm back in Kelso, Washington right now, which is where I grew up, which is right outside of Mount St. Helens, in a real small town. I'm back here to just start setting up new life and doing some new projects and reestablishing some new environments, right? So I was in Boulder. I had moved there from Austin, Texas. And in Boulder, I oversaw brand strategy at an app called TrueCoach. And they made software for personal trainers and coaches to deliver individualized coaching online. And so I was overseeing content strategy, brand strategy, and we got acquired after a year of massive growth, and then we ran into COVID and just blew up even more. And then as just like a lot of acquisitions and differentiating ideas of how things should be done, I was let go after the acquisition. And so I was, started up my new company or my new project, which is called a Choice Point. We'll talk about more later. As most of you can probably imagine, living in one of the more expensive cities in the world is not advantageous when you lose a salary. So moved back home with my parents. We're also getting older, having the opportunity to spend more time with them as I age and they age. I'm 34 and they're in their 60s. And so, life is short, not to look to mortality during the show. But prior to being in Boulder, I was in Austin, Texas. And there I ended up just randomly walking into a gym called Onnit, which is Joe DeFranco's gym, and he had partnered with Onnit, which is Joe Rogan's supplement company. And so I came on board as the very first member of the gym there, and then eventually coming on board to work there as like employee number 42. They were like a $30 million company then. We grew to over $90 million during my time there. I ended up coming on board to work there, oversee certifications, running partnerships, bringing in partnerships with Exos, Equinox, Gold's Gym, UCLA. I trained a number of athletes, notably guys like Jake Arrieta, Cy Young Award winner, World Series champion with the Cubs, and just got to be in a lot of spaces, from getting to sit down for breakfast with Mike Boyle to going to dinner with Dre Spina to in a meeting with Mark Verstegen and presenting at Eric Cressy's and so my career got to really take a really unique turn in Onnit in Austin and had this massive growth, and I owe a lot of my career to those 4 years there just hustling. But prior to that, I was in Portland, Oregon, where I was a personal trainer only by happenstance, right? I graduated college, the University of Portland, in 2008. For those of you who are old enough to remember, it was the financial recession was kicking off. And so it wasn't just hard to get a job in your field, it was hard to get a job in general. And so I ended up having to sell memberships at 24 Hour Fitness as a job to get by, and sold memberships, ended up getting into powerlifting, Olympic lifting, strongman competition, strong person, whatever the noun we're supposed to use, competitions, and eventually leaving to go work at an action sports company, getting fired for not being pro enough, coming back to Portland to end up, becoming a personal trainer, and then, taking off doing personal training because it's really just a sales gig. And, it was just kind of this really unique history. Going to school, thought I was going to work in sports marketing at Nike or at Adidas, which are home based in Portland. And so for me now to look at getting forced into this fitness industry and I say it like it was awful. I had to learn how to work out. But opened up all these unique opportunities, and kind of like, Bill and I were talking about before coming on, was just how opportunities see us. And he was curious if I was openly talking about the TrueCoach and getting let go. And I thought how important it was for people to see that shit happens, right? From a multitude of different reasons, right? I'm not ashamed to say, hey, this is what happened. And there's, bad parts on both ends of that. But I think it just comes across more authentic to be to be that open with people. So it's been a really unique journey. I'm very blessed for it. I think I'm in a spot now to where I want to just really get back to a lot of coaches, not because I think that like I'm better because I've taken this cert and you haven't, or well, whatever, but because I've gotten to just have a very unique career. And now it's at a spot to where here I find myself wanting to just share and how can I make the game easier, because it's a hard game, right? Selling, like whether you're a chiro, a PT, a trainer, selling sessions, selling services, looking like an authority to your peers, looking like someone that's got it figured out to other coaches, right? Like a therapist, like it's a tough game. And how many other career fields, and I don't know, I'm not trying to speak for anybody else, but like, I don't know if in accounting they do the same like pedigree of like going and getting certs and like established of who you work with as they do like in these kind of settings as like coaching, you know? So, you know, on top of that, you have a lot of people who just, you know, like anything, aren't gifted with the sales experience and the sales skills. And for me, as you can probably guess by my personality, it's something I'm fairly good at, and a role that people definitely don't necessarily come stock with. It's something they have to really learn. And so it's something I haven't had to learn. And so it's just something I kind of naturally had. So now it turns into how can I deliver this and give you an experience that helps you solve the pain point in your careers.
Awesome. So yeah, I didn't want to talk over each other on the delay, but that's great. And it reminds me a little bit of my career, getting my doctorate. And actually I got my doctorate in 2008. So a little ahead of you, a little older. You said you were 34 and aging. That made me feel great because I'm a little older, but you know, that's fine. And yeah, I mean, I got to work for a celebrity, fly around with him on his private jet for a few months, help him get ready for surgery. Being in New York City, where I was from, I got all these random opportunities that, you know, I was really lucky to get. It eventually led me to Dubai, where I met my wife. And you know, then came back to New York working this crazy personal training gym where it's like $20,000 a month to be a member, and billionaires and celebrities. And again, like, who cares at the end of the day, right? So that's kind of, I appreciate where your journey, learning about it, hearing about it. And then, yeah, like at the end of the day, like you said, what came up for me, and I'll throw this back at you, is you know, having that talent of sales is interesting, because now you're trying to teach that to other people. So it's that kind of, you know, great players, people who have that talent, can they turn that into something that they can share and breed with other people? Michael Jordan was not the best coach ever, right? People don't even realize he like tried his hand at coaching and he was a terrible coach. We can argue, yeah, everyone's going to say LeBron now, whatever, Kobe, but yeah, Jordan, one of the best, and to be a terrible coach, but that talent doesn't always translate. Larry Bird, same thing, not a great coach. I think he did better than Jordan, but you know, so I guess the question I want to throw back to you is, in terms of that, you can obviously speak from your own experience, but having that talent, that natural sales talent, how do you find producing systems and or your curriculum trying to say, this is what's going on in my brain, I want you to be able to do it? Because again, sales is something is definitely not natural for me. I try, you know, like I've read all the books of, you know, To Sell is Human and that kind of thing. And at the end of the day, if you don't know how to sell, you know, you're not going to make any money. No matter how good your services are, you know, maybe there's some ways to survive there. So yeah, I guess the question comes back of, did that make sense? Was there a question even in there? I don't even know, but otherwise I can reframe it.
Yeah. No, honestly, I struggled with it for a long time, like figuring out what it was, because I honestly didn't think there was something I maybe did differently. I think maybe I put myself in positions to do it more often than others. But, you know, so growing up, I grew up in a really rural town, and, you know, I was adopted. And so I was one of the only little Asian kids running around in a very predominantly Caucasian town, you know, high school football, rah kind of town. And so growing up, it was like, man, when you're always the different looking one, you were kind of used to being the center of attention. Well, then you add in, mom was a youth minister, so I was always in the youth group setting and hanging out with high schoolers and kids older than me. And then my grandpa was like a mailman for years, and so he just knew, and then a Daikin commissioner, so he just knew a lot of people in town. So very much like growing up, my childhood was a lot of like shaking hands and looking people in the eye and acting like a young gentleman and polishing those skills. And so when you have a natural affinity for it, and then it starts getting massaged really early, and then to grow up in the church reading at mass and being the altar boy and just doing things like that. Like, it doesn't matter, right? Like, I'll wear a white robe and have the priest put the hat on my thing, you know, like it doesn't embarrass me. I don't care that kids in my school are there, right? Like, you're there at church too, right? Like, I'm just up here doing the thing. It don't matter. But it gave me a lot of leadership skills growing up. And so as I got older, you know, I wasn't a good student. I wasn't good at school. I was just good at this, right? Like, I think what I did well early was, growing up, I figured out that learning was to learn to comprehend, less about memorizing. So early in my life, I probably wasn't set up to do a hard science major that was involved in a lot of like memorization. And thankfully, by the time I found exercise science and biology, kinesiology, I was a lifter. So it made a lot of sense, right? And growing up, I built a lot of like tables and stuff as a kid in woodshop. So you learn about mechanical stress and progressive and overload, right? And leverage. And so it just became, oh, I already know how to adaptation. I need to build up that joint structure because it's not strong enough to handle the stress that it's about to endure. Like, that makes sense. So going in, and then powerlifting is like a raw experience in like adaptation. So for me, getting into like, okay, I don't know if there was a unique experience that I had. It was just, I did it, right? More people need more reps. Go out and do it. And I read a book by Vanessa Van Edwards, who's ironically from Portland, and she used to train at the gym I used to train at. And her book is called Captivate, and she has a great YouTube channel. And she calls herself her branding is a recovering awkward person. And so I just started pumping through her YouTube channel and like looking at some of her videos, getting 2 million views on some of these videos. And the video was like, how to not be awkward, what to say in a meeting, how to speak up in a conference room full of people. And I'm like, I didn't know that was the thing, right? Like, I didn't know that someone was in the room with me that was like, and this, you know, you can say it's ego, you can say it's self-awareness, whatever. But like, I'm not thinking about you're scared to bring your idea up in the room. I'm going, holy crap, I got to get my idea in there so that way we're running with it, right? Because I want to sell my idea, right? But I very much come from being that like undersized kid that like had to scrap to like get my voice heard, so I wasn't like a little kid, right? Like when you're in the youth group setting, when you're 9 and you're with a bunch of like 18-year-olds and you're trying to not be the annoying little kid so that way you're not narking on the kids like who are like doing whatever in the corner, right? It's like you have to learn how to massage social environments. And so I think I just learned that really well. And watching Vanessa's channel, it became, I need to systematize it. And then it wasn't, you know, I'm not the biggest systems person in that, like, because N equals 1, right? Like, sure, I can say that here's a lot of best practices, but then I can also give you equally amounts of like, yeah, that doesn't work, right? Like, we can sit and say that like anterior loading someone is going to put them in a better position to squat 9 times out of 10. You know what I mean? And like the 10th time, you're like, the person just can't figure it out. And you're like, they just figure it out doing something different, right? And you're just like, there's nothing to explain it. So for me, I always get caught up being like, well, it's principles, right? What are some actions? Because each person, once again, when you learn, when you teach, man, we all know in the group of the room when you're teaching that there's people who are going to pick it up. There's people who just are never going to, they're just not getting it. People who are going to ask the same question all weekend or all class, right? And then the person who wants to make sure everybody knows that they could be in the room if they wanted to, right? That's what a room is when you're at the front of it. And so to watch how many people, like, to face-to-face interaction teaching and to watch faces and to get the like, oh, okay, that clicked, right? That's a very different experience. So for me, what I started teaching was, well, what I got really good at was talking in a way that like I sound fired up, right? So it became like I had to start asking people like, hey, what do you think I do? Like my partner Sayla, who I used to travel with all the time, mentors, people who I'm like, hey, what do I do differently that other people don't do well? And so they're like, oh, well, when you talk to someone, I think that you do a really good job making sure that you're paying attention to them. You're not on your phone, you're asking questions, you're clearly engaged, right? I do a good job with the follow-up game. Like I used to play a game early in my career. Like I'd reach out to someone every week to network. But like just little things like this. And then I picked up like talking with your hands, right? That was one. Undulating your voice to reflect emotion and change, right? Like I talk like this and my voice is changing and I'm like really erratic. And people are like, wow, you're just really into this. I'm like, no, it's because I'm kind of a raw person. And if I give you a really monotone version, I sound like a dick, right? But if I give you like a lot of this action, you know, I'm kind of just being, it moves it along differently. So yeah, man, it's like it really had to, it starts by asking questions. And it starts by like, what do I do to systematize? And then it's getting people, I think the rule of teaching is how do you show people what's possible. You give them some principles, some tools that they might be able to use, and then you have to put them in a position to do it. So a lot of times in my coaching workshops that I teach, especially when it's on the business side, and especially in the online world, is storytelling, right? And if you're familiar with the concept, sounds like you read quite a bit, a hero's journey, right? And the story arc. And so, but like getting people to know how to do their own. And not because you're going to monologue SNL style to every single person you meet, and here's who I am, and I've got 20 minutes, and this is why you should believe in me. But you getting really good at telling your own story to know why you're exactly in this space right here, like how you became Dr. Bo and not Bo the dentist or Bo the optometrist or Bo the lawyer, is very unique. And there's very unique perspective lessons in there that probably are going to be the thing that hits. I think we all have to remember at the end of the day, if you're a coach or therapist, we're a service-based industry, and we're trying to sell our services to other people in some fashion. And there's 8 billion people in the world. We don't need to be for everyone. We only need to be for a handful of people. So finding commonalities with people is really the linchpin of dysfunction as it relates to connection, right? And building an authentic connection. So if we're teaching people how to be really good at this, it really just became, I know I'm getting long on it, but it's to teach people how to tell their own story, right? And if you know your own story, you know where, as you as Dr. Bo and whatever your injuries or your past has been, right? The athlete that was you, the person that was you, you can look across the gym at any gym you go into and you're like, you see him immediately. You're like, oh, that was me, like 7 years ago, 10 years ago, 9 years ago, 20. You're like, oh, you're overworking this, you're doing this, oh, you're probably feeling this. You're like, you just know, right? To the person that struggles with body dysmorphia and their relationship with food, you can walk in the Globo gym and see the person on the stair climber or the treadmill that's there every single day at the same time doing the same thing. And you know what I mean? And you're like, I was that person. I am you. And how much better are you going to be at connecting with that person, talking strength conditioning or whatever your field is, yoga, massage, than trying to talk to someone that's not in your space, right? So that becomes, for me, it became storytelling was the way of getting people to understand, like, who are you just really good at talking to, right? You have someone that for whatever reason your voice resonates with, you just get along with, you have shared interests with, you have similar interests with, right? Like, you have to find a way. People are like, oh, they're always like, I don't like small talk. And it's like, well, we have to get past small talk. So yeah, getting people, what's your story? Who are you good at talking to? Start using your hands, change the way your voice goes. And the only way it happened was just by learning back and forth. Yeah, cha-chas.
Yeah, and no, I appreciate that, and I appreciate the rants and rambles, and yeah, drink some water. I'm sure there's another one coming up after this next question, so get prepared for all that. I did want to, for those listening, they won't be able to see this, but you said you're not a very systematized person. I'm going to call you on that because you have what looks like a few systems behind your head. You have the everyday, and your internet is a little funky, so I can see read, walk, write, create, move, connect, meditate, and gratitude. Awesome. I love that. I don't know what's on the Post-its. I mean, that might be more of a calendar project that you're working on to help you keep motivated there. So yeah, I mean, is that something you check off each time? I'd love to hear your process on that, kind of Tim Ferriss, what's your morning routine thing, if you will. So go for it.
Yeah. Fun fact. I helped Tim Ferriss build his home gym in Austin, Texas. And so I got to meet him, and it was a really cool experience. Really nice guy. So I am by nature naturally just a kind of a keep it top of head person. I've never been a note taker, right? Like I was a kid in college that would show, I didn't buy books. I just showed up to class. Not that I had great grades, right? But like I got through, for better for worse. But I got everything out of it I needed to, right? Like 4-pointing in my undergrad wouldn't have given me a better experience than it did being the super social party thrower, right? So it may have changed the path differently, but I was someone that went to the library to like socialize while everybody just happened to be there instead of like sit down and study. So I've always been able to get by being a heavy doer, put your head down and just work, go for it. And it's, when I became a trainer back in 2010, it was like, man, I had a 40-hour week schedule in 3 months, at 24 Hour Fitness. It was like, all right, that wasn't that hard, right? And it was like, okay, and you just, but for me, it was, okay, it became harder and harder to say no to clients. So it was like, oh, 5 a.m. on Monday to 8 p.m. on Monday. Oh, you do that every day of the week, right? And I blocked my workout time off, but everything else was free game because there was no reason for me to say no, right? I'm 26. I walk 10 blocks to work. Like, I don't have a reason to not take a client at 7 p.m., right? Like, I'm going to be either eating or going out. So me working is actually a net positive on multiple fronts, right? So, but then you would just end up working a ton. And then Onnit, for those of you who are maybe know about me or familiar with my story, man, I was flying 50 plus flights a year, right? 100 nights in a hotel, 30 plus nights in a row, multiple times in a row on the road. And it was like, because, hey, when Onnit it gave me this opportunity to just travel the world and produce and be me, it was, no one else is ever going to give me this opportunity like this again. So I can say that, yeah, I went out in Rainy Street and partied in Austin for the weekend, or I can say I went and took the VP of the NFL out to dinner, or I can say I went to Cleveland to work with some of the Cleveland Indians, or I can say I flew to New York to work with Mark Fisher, right? So, you know what I mean? From a career standpoint, when I moved there, very clearly from Portland to Austin, it was to get a career going. And I was always able just to insert more effort. Well, when I got to TrueCoach, I switched from a heavy biz dev relationship teaching output role to a content building role. And I have a podcast called Fitness Break Room, been interviewing people and just having coaches tell their stories, right? And I want people to know how Mike Bledsoe became Mike Bledsoe before he had Barbell Shrugged, you know, kind of thing. And it was like producing content, but then doing it for a job and for an app and a startup and like having to build a team and accelerate was, oh, I have to like get this thing going, but I also have to be the guy writing articles for a little bit. So the only way I was able to really do it was pare down my time differently, right? Like sit down at a computer and actually go. Whereas like in my roles on it was like I could kind of like come sit down and do it for a little bit and then bounce out, because it wasn't deliverable based, it was output based. And so as I now embark more on entrepreneurship and doing my own stuff, mentorships, online coaching myself, launching my own business, I also realized that I'm 34 and single. And so if for me, I have this energy right now to do this kind of stuff. Right now I also have the time to do it. I don't have kids that are running around my house, so I have time. So it's like, well, I have all the ambition and effort to want to go do the thing I can. But if I can also use this time to learn how to get good at using my time, right? Hey, let me learn how to get efficient with my time block, that be very mindful with my time, not sitting and scrolling Instagram for 30 minutes and getting lost and then trying to refigure out what your article is about. Like sit down for 2 hours and get the article done, right? And so I love the, what's it called? The Palindromo, I forget how it's called, but it's using a timer, right? And so you set this over and it's like, all right, you got 30 minutes, go, no distractions, hammer it. And then I got another little one that's like a 5-minute one, right? And take a 5-minute break and then reset. But then it kind of moved into like, okay, let me be better at like time blocking. All right, I'm going to work on this project at this time. And that way it gives you the feeling of, hey, I know I've worked on this. So I've always been trying to get after that. Mark Fisher's a big mentor for me and a huge inspirer of career mentorship growth. But something I did was, you see these poster boards that are like big sticky notes. And I call this planning time to plan. So we all have a million notes on our phone, a million cocktail napkins shoved in desk drawers and, jean pockets and ideas, $1 million ideas, whatever. I sat down and I just poured a big ass pot of coffee and I called it planning time to plan. And I grabbed everything and I took every note and I put it on the poster board. And if I had it, I went and like strung it around my apartment. And so that way I could visually see like, oh, because I have the same idea like 17 times, let's just say. Or let's say it's like, I want to do a cookbook someday. And it's like, oh, these are all just multiple ideas for the cookbook. Okay. But to be able to see it all on one board and visualize it, the way I explain it to people is, if you're a Harry Potter fan, and he goes, the thing where he takes the thought out of his head and puts it in the bowl of water, then they can like look at the memory. Like that's how I look at, because then I can be working and I'm like, oh, it'd be a dope idea. And then I look up and it's like, oh, hey, you've already thought of that. And I can just go right back to what I was doing. I don't get lost in this. I'll remember that, right? Like how many times have we all done that? So then it turned into Kanban systems of trying to doing done lists. And I'm not perfect at it, but at least it gives me something visual to look at and say, oh, here's where you're at. Even if it's something I'm only updating every once in a while. So for me, it's just been a consistent visual exploration of finding ways that allow me to be me from a creativity, like from 5 a.m. to 8 a.m. I just have write, create, work. And so like sometimes I want to read for 3 hours. Sometimes I want to write for 3 hours. Sometimes I want to, so that period of time, like I just let myself have a whatever you feel as you get going or coffee. But then like after my morning cardio, I'll like, all right, here's an hour window, sit the F down and hammer on a project you need to get done. And that's been really helpful, right? Because life happens, things happen, this gets distracted, a call, an email, yada, yada. But if I can get a couple of those bursts in or have those structured time, right? No one works 40 hours a week, right? Even if you're in the office. So if I know I'm getting at least 3 hours of effort time on these projects I really care about, now at least I'm not having the anxiety of like, oh my God, you're behind because you're not working on the things. I know I'm chipping away at it. I may not have it where I want it to be, but at least it's somewhat organized and it's ready to go for me to put into because it's easy to put into.
Love it. Love it. I was just looking at my crazy notes here of same stacks of papers. And I actually have this productivity planner and I've had it for about a couple of years. And other than putting my name in it, maybe it's completely blank. So planning, productivity, not the best. I just did a post actually on my Instagram about 10 minutes of like, I set the timer. I'm like, I'm going to read for 10 minutes. I needed to do that to set the timer to be like, this is what I'm focusing on for the 10 minutes. So totally, I appreciate again where you're coming from with a lot of that. And again, I think it's the, that 8, and I had a guy on a few podcasts ago, Adam Caratini. He's the head coach down in Orlando at Eat the Frog Fitness. And he actually shared his story of having ADHD and that same concept of like being all over the place. And if he doesn't plan, he's gonna, struggle city and just not get anything done and or get like 1% of 20 different projects done. So neither one is really great. So I want to jump over to your next project that we were talking about, the choice point values-based stress solutions. I was telling you before, and anyone who's been following my stuff knows I talk a lot about stress management, sleep, recovery, mindset, all that fun stuff, how it all works together. Values-based solutions is great, though. I want to hear how you define that and definitely dive into that. I'm curious if you've developed a little bit of that through TrueCoach with that OPEX team. I used to work with OPEX, who kind of, I think, originally developed back when they were OPT, the TrueCoach model. By the way, were you there when it was Fitbot? Because I knew it back then. But yeah, tell us about that next project.
Yeah, so I came over right at the switch of Fitbot to TrueCoach. They had just raised their first round of funding from Eric Rosa, who is the guy who just bought CrossFit. And so that $2 million seed fund, I don't know if I was supposed to say that loud, was whatever. Doesn't matter. Is what allowed like me to get hired, right? And like hire a bunch of engineers to help build a platform that scaled us. So no, this was actually more spawned from Onnit. And so I mentioned earlier that, I really wanted to work in baseball. I think I said that. But at Onnit, Curtis Hembroff was the head of 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu. And him and I were buddies, obviously, being at Onnit. And he knew I was a big baseball fan, like wanted to work in Major League Baseball, loved baseball. And, growing up in we're 90s kids, right? What 90s kid didn't grow up watching like Deion Sanders fly from New York to Atlanta for, a playoff game and a World Series, right? Or Ken Griffey Jr.'s or Michael Jordan years. Like, you're like, oh my gosh, a new pair of Nikes every single day. Like, that was the era for us, right? And so I always thought I'd be in the sports marketing era. Anyway, Curtis texted me one night. Hey, some baseball player came to like roll jiu-jitsu last night. And I was like, oh, dope. Who was it? And he's like, I don't know. So I jumped on the gym management software and I was like, oh, John Baker. And John played for 12 years with a multitude of number of teams, went to Cal, Berkeley, was a catcher. And I just started tweeting him. I was like, hey, dude, saw you came to Onnit. Really bummed I missed you. Would have loved to catch up. Hey, hit me up next time. And we just started bullshitting. And next thing you know, like so he was the minor league coordinator for mental skills. And so he'd fly around to work with the different AAA and minor league teams and support the staffs and the players. And so we were able to just like hit it off and hang out and work out and just like become buddies. And, while we're working out and he's like, damn, dude, we're in Austin. Like, who you should be training Jake Arrieta, he lives here in town. And I was like, yeah, dude, that sounds pretty cool. And he's like, all right, hold on. And so he connects us via text. He's like, hey, Jake, this is Sam. You should be training with him. He lives in Austin. And he's like, oh, okay. And then I happened to be going to Chicago, and Jake played for the Cubs at the time. I was going to be in Chicago in a few weeks. And I was like, hey, I'm going to be in Chicago in 2 weeks. If you want to get lunch on this day, you guys have a home game. He's like, oh, yeah, let's meet here. And I was like, okay. Right. So anyway, Jake and I start becoming really close and getting to train him. And I have a lot to thank John for in that introduction. But John and I, John went on to become the mental skills, applied mental science coordinator for the Cubs, which is the in the dugout mental science coordinator. He just finished his master's in performance psychology at Arizona State. And his work and his thesis in his master's program was stemmed heavy through the work of Dr. Stephen Hayes, who's out of University of Reno, who has a process called acceptance and commitment therapy. And it's values-based action, values-based action alignment. And so what that means, like if we're looking at therapy, and I'm not a therapist, so please forgive me if I butcher this, cognitive therapy, which is a very popular practice for therapy practice. And acceptance and commitment therapy stems off of that and is pushing people into action, right? And so it's identifying your values and pushing you and incentivizing you into habit change, into taking more action into those values. And so that was something really big for him as he was going through that process. And honestly, the way this project started out was it was going to be a retreat for professional athletes to attend after they finished playing, to help them reintegrate back into civilian world. Because a lot of these people came from the Dominican at 16 to 8, and didn't go to high school, didn't go to college. They came over when they were 18, 16, somewhere there. Or even the college guys, right? Like they may have went to college, left in the draft, and didn't finish school, didn't really have a sport, a career path other than baseball or football or basketball. And so played a year or two in the show or the league, and then are trying to get a job. And or conversely, maybe someone who did really well in their career and is trying to figure out retirement more effectively than maybe pounding a case of beer and hitting the golf course every day. Nothing that's bad in certain settings. Not that I'm condoning that activity, but to be able to create an environment for these athletes to help them establish their next step, right? And I think it's really cool. I think we look up to athletes or I know I did as a kid, is being able to provide for your family by doing the coolest thing ever, and that's playing a sport, right? Like that's pretty sweet, living out your dream doing that. And so for a lot of them, though, it's become so routine to your cleats, what stadium you're at, what uniform to wear, what you're doing. And then when you get out is to establish new values. And for us, it wasn't I don't care if it's into smoking meat, cooking food, to drawing, to graphic design. It doesn't matter, but helping you find something that you value to put your time into. And then obviously COVID had a pretty big impact in our conversations, and it turned into hey, can this be an app? And so then we had started talking to my buddy Seth, who has a really decorated engineering background from Riot Games, EA Games, and Facebook and Intel, HTC. And so then we kind of started putting together this idea around making this an app experience. And then we brought in Carlos Quinton, who is John's best friend from baseball, and Carlos went to Stanford and played 8 years in MLB. Was a 2-time All-Star and just finishing up his MBA from University or UCSD in San Diego. Excuse me. And so he got us through this into this accelerator program at the school. And so now we are launching this app that is going to be a digital experience. And sorry, we're still playing with how this gets elaborated, so it's not obviously hyper polished. This digital experience of helping people identify their values through an app, and then incentivizing them to interact with that app, or interact with those values, right? And then you get a gamification and a reward for doing it. So if I'm someone that values discipline, and I wake up at 3 a.m. every morning, right? That might be a picture of my clock, like Jocko style. But the difference is we don't necessarily care about you posting it like posting your virtues, like Instagram. We want you to post your values, and we want you to live in those values. So we're now working through the process of how this experience is helping people with habit change, excuse me, and reduction of stress through a mindfulness practice, and becoming aware of not only the things that are maybe causing disruption in your life, but more so of leaning into the things that are the green light goes. And so it's been a really amazing experience getting to go through this random like opportunity to meet this guy, who rolled jiu-jitsu, to now we're building this app, and to, for me to look at wanting to work in baseball now, it's like, holy crap, I get to work with like 2 baseball players and do this thing. Like I hate this. I don't mean to sound like I'm bragging, but for me it was like very like honoring. It's very cool. And so now we're really, excuse me, to look at being able to deliver this, and our goal, what we're looking at is helping people identify, their values, helping people get them to, okay, here's where the issue is, here's the problem, and here's where to actually go, right? Like the downfall with like mindfulness apps and like things like Headspace and Calm, and not that I'm not a supporter of mindfulness, because I am, and meditation, but you can't meditate your stress away. You can't meditate your problems away. They can help you cultivate mindfulness. They can help you deal with those emotions and that rise. But if you're looking at it from a baseball standing, you can't not meditate your way out of the box in Game 7 with a full count in the bottom of the 9th inning. Like that's stress, and you got to want to be there. And yes, there's different stresses, but it's about helping you manage that stress so that way you can actually show up and be more fulfilled, right? And that's really the game that we're looking at, is habit change for fulfillment, for happiness, for stress relief, and just trying to create it in a digital experience that helps people be successful.
Yeah, man, that was an awesome pitch. I'm excited to see what that app looks like. And again, I end up working with my clients and having those conversations and that one-on-one kind of situation. And that bandwidth is definitely not always there for a trainer, for, again, a lot of different things we're trying to do. I don't want to do that, but I know it's necessary. So again, I'm not a psychotherapist. I try to refer some people toward my wife, but she specializes in sex and relationships. I know plenty of other good psychotherapists, mental health experts. But when it comes to me, being my expertise is the human body, getting it to work better, getting it to move better, adding in the nutrition component, that rest recovery component, being able to speak to those things is also huge for me. But yeah, I continue to look for resources that I can send people to and incorporate into my coaching, where, again, because if they don't have that, like you're saying, there's no point to keep working on their hip or their knee. Like we can address those, we're just kicking the can down the road. We're addressing those symptoms. And that's where my brand is actually Fit Care, where I got tired of people chasing symptoms, and I want to address fitness, and fitness includes your ability to deal with stress. And like you're saying, ironically, I was listening to a podcast with Dan John earlier this morning when I was walking my dog. And Dan John, for those who don't know, is one of the most prolific authors in the fitness space, and also just he's put out stuff that I think has changed the game in a lot of ways. I don't know if you've had the chance to interact with him. I'd love to get him on the podcast if anyone wants to set that up. But he's definitely one of those heroes out there. So, but he was talking about working with his athletes, and again, making sure they get recreating those scenarios like you're talking about, batting in the bottom of the 9th with two out and bases loaded, all that stuff, team down by 3. And so, he recreates that. He wants to figure out if that's what we need to work on. You should be able to hit that every single time. And, when he was talking about his experience working out or competing, and, the guy interviewing him was asking about his experience. And did you know you were going to win? Is it that kind of thing, that kind of mental health or mental awareness around it? He said, as soon as I got there, like, this was exactly what I had practiced. And, it was I knew how to set up for that situation. So again, that's the thing is people tend to not realize how impactful certain things like this can be for their day to day. Again, even if they have a 9 to 5, even if they're just working on being parents, if you can help manage those stress points, again, my saying is get 1% better every day. That includes, being able to get your stress down a little bit. My whole theory of aging is that, you know, we're just getting this damage and damage and damage done to us, and this inability to handle stress and different foods and different types of movements. And we just get worse unless we figure out how to stop that, all that damage, mitigate it. And again, this sounds like an awesome tool that, again, I've been looking for a long time, short of, again, having these deep conversations with people on some different levels. So yeah, I'm excited to see how, do you guys have a launch date, and you want to talk about any of that component?
Yeah, you know, we just finished the accelerator, so we are just about ready to launch an MVP, just for us to have and start playing with a little bit beta testing. We don't have it. We've been kind of targeting like June being our like official like go to market launch, raise money, ramp time, just because baseball season just started and John's life is pretty much in the gutter right now for a few months. And so yeah, that's, I mean. So there really isn't anything other than what like Seth and I, the tech guy, put out on social. We'll talk about it, like stuff we do, but yeah, other than just kind of like staying attuned to what I'm doing, it's not really out yet. Talking about it, obviously, but yeah, we don't have anything you can demo yet, but it's soon, right? Like it's like it's hard, right? Because you get in that spot of, well, I'm doing this thing, and then it's like, well, you know, I have a lot of people say they're doing a thing. But like, okay, you know, trying to get to market. And so thankfully, you know, the position that we took was having a developer on the front end instead of like trying to have to go raise money to pay the developer to have the idea. We were able to, you know, build something in-house out of the gate. So, you know, we've been moving around wireframes. We played with some, you know, UI stuff, but, you know, not quite ready to open that up, but happy to share what I do.
Awesome. Definitely looking forward to that, man. And I think I heard you talk about this on another podcast, so I feel like it's fair game. It's something that we're going to go back to kind of that first rant and rave that you had. I want to pull out of that. You talked about, actually, I was just, because I was looking up before we chatted, one of your other podcasts you were a guest on. And actually your podcast, are you going to, I'll ask this also, are you going to continue? Because I saw you, the last episode of your podcast, The Fitness Break Room, was January 1st. Are you going to continue with that? What should we look forward to that more, or what's going on with that?
Well, that was January 1st of last year, I believe. The Fitness Break Room. Yeah, it's you know, I tried to get it going last year, and my previous employer felt I was promoting myself too much, so I just kind of shut it down to stop the war, if you will. So, but now that I'm running a mentorship, right? So I'm just kicking off a mentorship, about to launch another one to another 15,000 coaches. And that'll be a little bit different angle, but I have incentive now to bring a Fitness Break Room back, right? And maybe at a different scale. Before it was cool because I only traveled, right? Like that was kind of my play, was interviews were only in person, right? And I was all over the country all the time, 3 cities a week almost. But now it, you know, I think I do want to bring it back. I don't have an official date. Like I'm trying to get a lot of projects off the ground. And as we talked about, the time management's not my forte in that. But yeah, Fitness Break Room is, excuse me, on its way of coming back. I'm trying to get all the assets to like put together to start launching it, and just doing shows around cool stories of coaches and people, and but also maybe talking more about training and beyond. I think it's just tough for me, right? Like I'm not a podcast digester. I'll listen to a Rogan episode here and there, like Naval or Kevin Hart, like a few interesting episodes, but that's not how I digest content. I'm usually a course person. So it's, and I don't mean that to sound snooty, right? Like I just meant like I would rather do a course for a while than I would listen to podcasts for education. Yeah, sorry, no real answer on it, but yeah, Fitness Break Room is coming back, and it'll probably come back underneath my channel. I think the way it's going to happen is, I'll put everything underneath my YouTube channel under myself, and then have like Fitness Break Room as a show. I think I'm going to have a vlog that's just around like different stuff I'm doing. I'm toying around with like, I've been really kind of playing with the idea of getting out of fitness entirely. I almost didn't jump back in after the TrueCoach thing and do anything to do with it. And so I'm going to launch a separate podcast that's a lot, excuse me, a lot more like lifestyle stuff. And that's everything from like kitchen literacy to like how to grow food, right? Like we live out in the country on 5 acres. My dad and I are talking about putting in a micro hydro system, right? Putting 2 4,000 gallon drums of water in the back hill, and pulling off a back reservoir and setting up our own off the grid power system around, and solar, right? So like, you know, I just got to grow up doing a lot of cool shit. So I'm thinking like that would be fun, right? Like from how to grill a steak to how to set up a hydro system to like how to set up a greenhouse. So yeah, you know what? Like I don't know is just the long-winded answer of me saying yes, maybe, probably. I need help. I don't know. It's one more thing to add to the list.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll say I double checked on my phone there as we were talking. July 1st of 2020 was your last episode. And that's all right. So so you kind of touched around what I did want to ask you before I asked that question. So the real question I want to ask you is, and I'm doing the hand thing, I'm taking all the notes from you, talking with my hands. So the real question is,
It's good.
yeah. So the real question is, you touched on this, and again, the other podcast I saw you on, of how do we get the bullshit out of the fitness space, the personal training space, between the diets, between the, hey, personal trainer, you can make, 17 figures in the next 6 days, and we'll get you 72 new clients in the next, week. And again, all that stuff's out there, and I'm exaggerating a little bit, but it is pretty bad to those extents. Is it be the change you want to see in the world, create these systems like you're doing with this stress app, and be that change and affect more people and show them that you can do it the right way? Or is there any other like kick people in the teeth kind of thing? Because I do see it. I see it in physical therapy. I see it in chiropractic, in the medical space. Again, that's again where my brand is, Fit Care. I just want to change. I would shake everyone and say, stop. Even people on Peloton, I'm like, can we get to you and say, this is great that you're doing it, but I want to, add these other elements to it. It's not a complete picture of fitness. So that's my quick rant. And I guess, is there a way to change and make it better? Can we use Joe Rogan with your connections to him and that platform to get, I know he talks about it too. So yeah, how are we doing it?
Man, I think this is how I ended up in like the behavior change space with John, right? And looking at, and if you guys check this book out, it's called A Liberated Mind by Stephen Hayes. And to really start looking at like, what's the linchpin of dysfunction, right? Like if we looked at it from a movement setting, well, like, okay, you got back pain. Great. Well, I bet you have poor hips. Yep. I bet your knees probably also don't feel good. Yep. I bet you probably have really crappy ankles. Yep. I bet you have weak feet. Yep. Hey, I bet you have a really crappy big toe. You're like, yep. Right. So like, how many things could we like, is the big toe the linchpin of dysfunction when it comes to movement, right? Like, all right, if we had to choose one thing for everybody to work on, is it the squat pattern, or is it like giving everybody a big toe that works so they at least walk better? Because we take 3,000 steps instead of doing 5 squats, right? Like, and so it became the really difficult question of like, the needle doesn't really move. And I don't mean to sound like a pessimistic asshole, but being back home right now, my parents have traditional like satellite TV, which I haven't had in years, right? A lot of us have streaming. We don't have, why my connection's terrible is because we have a satellite internet, which is not very good, instead of like a hotspot, which is okay, which we're switching back to. But like the streaming thing, like they don't have, like it's new to them, novel, the concept of it, and Netflix having it. And so, but to watch the ads, and I'm like sitting and watching, like they'll watch CNN, and I'm like, holy crap, okay, I forgot about the eat this gummy twice a day that makes you burn fat and what, you know what I mean? You forget you see those things because we work in the fitness space, not in the fat loss space, right? The fat loss, weight loss space is huge. My buddy Kevin Kwan, guys, check him out. He's a great copywriter. Him and I were bullshitting one day, and just around like fat loss products. And we started like looking at like copy from like different fat loss ads. And I was like, oh, it's so not fitness, right? It's so not hypertrophy overload. Like even the baseline NASM fresh out of the box trainer is still going to be lifting oriented, like resistance training oriented, right? Like that's so much more than the average person that's not into fitness, right? Like I mentioned earlier, there's 8 billion people in the world. There's not 8 billion people that have gym memberships and personal trainers and exercise routines, right? If anything, like we are the small minority, right? A percentage is small. And so we had to start looking at what are our battles and what are the wins. And, when I remember, and this is the Dunning-Kruger effect. And the Dunning-Kruger effect is when you're brand new at something, you think you're really good at it. And then you realize you get a little perspective and realize like, oh, I'm not very good at it. Right. And so like fitness, like, oh, I learned a couple things. I must know everything there is to know about fitness. And then you take a little bit more time and you're like, oh shit, I don't know anything about fitness. Holy crap. And then you're old and salty like me, and after 12 years, and it's, oh man, okay, and so everything gets kind of chunked down, right? At first it was like mechanical stress, progressive overload. Everybody needs a barbell on their back, and we need to get more strong because strength is going to help prevent them from deviating in positions. And then we moved into the mobility space. Like, everybody's rigid. We shouldn't, their squat looks terrible. We shouldn't be overloading that much. Too much density, too much volume, not enough movement capacity, right? And Kelly Starrett, obviously huge in that space and great guy in that space. And but we really started looking at movement became a big conversation. Well, then, the diet space has never changed, right? Keto, Atkins, slim fat, all the same things just repeated over and over and over, right? So we can just, and they live off the hype cycle. If you guys are, if we're talking about psychology, go look up the hype cycle. It's what supplements and weight loss drugs they live off of, right? And so for us, it really comes down to, we had to get better at connecting with people, because as much as I would love for everybody to go find their 3RM deadlift, because I want everybody to have a relationship with a barbell, not because I think everybody should go be a powerlifter, but because there's so many great lessons that come from you, like deadlifting twice a week, right? And just that skill set and just all the things that are going to encompass with like trying to make you a better deadlifter, right? Oh, we're going to work on your thoracolumbar mobility or juncture, so that way it actually gets into extension, so we can have a neutral spine. We're going to work on scapular retraction. We're going to work on hip extension, hip flexion, right? Like, you're going to get all the things that like I would want from you in that thing, and I'm going to ask you to do something that challenges you. So there's good things from it. But then we have like, you look at like the group exercise world, and you have like people who are not driven by that style of fitness. And here's where I think the real problem is. The real problem is that when most people finish high school, they are expected to just somehow figure out fitness, right? I grew up in a town where a lot of people didn't go to college. And so and it's definitely not as a fit town. We have every fast food restaurant possible here. But, going to college, even then, like, I didn't know fitness. I played sports, and I did the weightlifting programs after high school. I couldn't have told you what a contralateral rear foot elevated split squat was, or a dumbbell bench press was. I can tell you what curls were. I can tell you what like bench press was. I can tell you what squats were. I didn't like doing it because it hurt my back, because it felt heavy on my back, right? And so I did like a lot of jump roping and like sprinting and running stairs and bullshit like that. But for a lot of kids, gym is the only real experience with formal exercise in people's lives. And unless you're a sport player, more or less, in junior high, high school, gym probably sucks, right? Like, for me, I played baseball. So when we played dodgeball in gym class, like, I loved it. Like, I could throw and catch. But to guess that someone who doesn't have that skill set, because they didn't play baseball, because they didn't have parents that put them in that position, that didn't, whatever that reason is, we're going back to parents and everything else, but is a very different conversation. So it really came from me, it was like the relationship that people have with movement in high school and fitness, and there's not education there, right? Like, if we really want to change the health and fitness industry, we need to teach kitchen literacy from junior high, high school, like how to cook food, maybe even grow food. I do think that micro communities are coming back, but that's another topic. But at least cooking food, right? The amount of like, fun fact, I went to college and a little private Catholic college, and I had a roommate in senior year of college. And Justin, bless your heart, I love you dearly, one of my closest friends, had a great MCAT score in medical school. He's an anesthesiologist. And it's second semester of senior year of undergrad. And he looks at me and he grabs, the dishwashing soap that comes in like its individual wrapped plastic bags, like it's got the tablet, right? He looks at me and he goes, "Hey, do I need to take this out of the plastic?" "Yep." "Well, it's going to dissolve." "Yep, it's soap. It should do that." "Huh." And the jet dry ball on top. He's like, "Well, is that going to break the dishes?" "Nope, that's supposed to dissolve too." He's like, "Oh, wow. Huh, I didn't know that." I'm like, "Justin, you're a senior in college. You're going to medical school, right? Like, you don't know what, right?" So, but like teaching, like these kids now, like, you want someone to eat healthier. We're not designed to eat less. From our nervous system, right? We're designed to survive. So in the opportunity to have dense calories with little effort, we're wired to take that every time. We're the only animal in the world that has food abundance figured out. And I know not everybody has meals all the time. We can get, but like from an animal level, right? Imagine a lion in Africa looking at a hyena and saying, grabbing his phone, "Hey dude, I feel like antelope today." Cool. A hyena runs over, gets him an antelope, drops it right in front of him, and then he just takes off. Right? Like, what would animals look like if they had that opportunity of protein access, food access? Right? Well, calories, right? That's a sacred thing to us. Protein's a sacred thing to us as a survival thing. So for us, we have to start improving kitchen literacy. We'd have to improve teaching people how to manage calories. I hate to make it only about calories in, calories out, because it is true, but I think the negative effect of that is you get a lot of people who don't eat by only going the calories in, calories out effort, right? As opposed to using like a motivational interviewing technique or an abundance effort, like Precision Nutrition does a great job of like, hey, let's just get you adding things into your life. Let's get you adding a glass of water. Let's get you adding an extra serving of protein, right? We have to debunk and defunk or demystify the ideology of perfection, of that we are a soft creature that is not adaptable. And I say that in sorry for those of you who love Dave Asprey if you're in this wagon, but eating a French fry is not going to kill you, right? Is it going to make you feel the best tomorrow morning? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. It could not affect you at all, right? But in terms of like, hey, we're in this new world of animals called we have too much food and we have to like consciously eat less of it when it's around, right? Like how many experiments have they done where like, let's leave cookies on the table and how often people eat the cookies. The cookies always get eaten. They're never not going to get eaten, right? Given the opportunity to walk by and grab it. So we have to teach people how to have, it comes across now as discipline, but people have emotional ties to food. It's not casserole, it's grandma's casserole, right? I remember very much we went to brunch after, there was one of these big old brunches, right? Seafood buffet kind of things as a kid. It was like one of the coolest brunches ever as a kid, like crab legs and omelet station. It's like a 9-year-old. You think it's the dopest thing ever. And I remember we were there with my whole family, my grandparents, and after my grandpa died, whoever it was, we went back as a family, and I was expecting it to be this like really great experience every time, and it was like kind of the food was kind of crappy, right? It was really just let down. I was like, wow. And it was such a lesson in like the experience trumps the actual thing, right? But for so much of us, food represents not the food. We don't see Pringles. We see, oh my God, I'm so stressed out in my life that that's a moment of feeling good, right? It's guaranteed dopamine, right? In a highly palatable sensation. So is it that we have like, as much as I would love to say that like I'm full paleo and I only eat berries and seeds, and that's like the virtue of that and saying like I do that, whether it's because I want to do it because I really think it's better for me, or is it because I think I'm better than you, or because I think it whatever, right? Like that is a thing that's cool to do and I'm okay with you being that, but like the calorie balance is a thing if this is the goal. However, I'm also the person that says, you know what? Don't dog the dude that eats the pizza going into Planet Fitness every week, right? Because if you've never worked out before and you go to Planet Fitness 3 days a week and walk on the treadmill 30 minutes a day and you eat the pizza, right? I'm okay with that because you just did a new thing, which is walking on the treadmill. We have to change your expectations and say, well, I walk on the treadmill. I don't know why I'm not losing weight. It's like, okay, now we have to deal with hard shit now, right? So if we look at the term that Stephen Hayes uses, psychological flexibility, I work a lot with Dr. Mike T. Nelson. We can look at our metabolic flexibility, which is what his work is. But it's our body's ability to undulate and buffer between stress, going between a sympathetic and a parasympathetic drive, right? Whether that's a stressful moment or being able to downregulate. But also we can look at that from a fuel selection switching, right? And saying, okay, well, if I'm chilling out, like I don't need high levels of glucose to moderate me sitting around peeling onions, right? I don't know. I'm just making it up, yeah. Right? Versus like, shit, if I'm running from a hyena that's trying to eat my ass, right? Like I for sure hope I'm able to pump through sugar and buffer lactate and run, right? For longer than at least the last guy. And so it becomes like, oh, but why are those things hard? Well, because you're so stressed out. Your body's so overloaded with all this other sympathetic load from finances, relationships, jobs, your own relationship with your health and fitness, that everything is so overloaded. So when we start looking at it, the real game becomes managing expectations, helping you be successful, because success drives success, and get you to, hey, it's not about being paleo for the rest of your life. Is it better that you eat more grass-fed meat? Sure. Is it better if you just eat more protein? That's even better, right? Like we gotta get people to get rid of the notion that letting great be the enemy of good, right? We have to just be on the mission of doing better, right? And that's up to us. That's up to us flipping the switch in our own head. It's like, I got to deal with hard shit, right? Like if I want to be able to play on the ground with my kids and it hurts to walk from my bathroom to my Barker lounger right now, sorry, shit's going to be hard. I'm sorry, right? But there's a lot of resources out there to help you. It doesn't negate the fact that that journey isn't going to be hard for you, but that's the piece that we're in. However, we also have to change the relationship, right? Like we have to change how you feel about, bro, like it's not every trainer, like the amount of trainers I've heard that like, oh my God, I had an eating disorder and I had this, and I go, it's all of them. It's every single person. No one has this game figured out. I go, there's 8 billion people in the world. Name me one that doesn't want to change one thing about the way their body looks and feels. Mr. Universe, Mrs. Olympia, Mr. Universe, I don't know, whoever wins the male and female version of those awards is getting off stage going, boy, I could have done this better, right? They're already looking at next year. I could be bigger. And you're like, wait, you're arguably the most symmetrically cut human in the world. And you're bitching that you're not where you want to be, right? Like, but that's just the expectation of our industry, right? What we really have to get to, and this is why powerlifting and Olympic lifting, these strength sports are so popular, and CrossFit does a good job of getting people into it, is teaching people a movement practice. Right? Because then fitness becomes not about punishment for the calories you ate. It doesn't become punishment for what you didn't do or how unsuccessful you were. It becomes, oh my God, I love to Olympic lift. I love to feel how powerful I feel under the bar. I love to go move my body. Oh, eating McDonald's the day before my meet actually is a really poor thing to do before a heavy squat dominant sport. Or it's like, you know what? I just crushed 9 million squats today. I am eating all the chicken nuggets in the world, right? But you can see how the empowerment, the voice and the message changes from when you find a movement practice. And this is where I've done a lot of educational certs, like animal flow. I'm a big animal flow person, body weight, rotational capacity, and gymnastics. And that is awesome, right? Is it the most complete system that's going to help someone lose weight, do all the things? No, it's a body weight system. It's got a lot of great attributes, but if I had to choose between someone adopting a movement system and maybe being 20 pounds overweight, but at least now moving 5 days a week and making different decisions about how they treat their body, that wins for me over, well, I just did this new workout routine from the magazine. I'm going to try to go paleo again. I'm going to try to go keto, right? I just got back from Costco and it's amazing. I don't know what it is, but I'm literally looking at a protein powder, and what I bought before, it was like a different flavor. And I was just looking at the package, and this person, not in good shape, not clearly a fitness person, like, and older, was like, that's such a good one. I think you should get that one. That one makes me feel really good. And I was just like, thank you. I really appreciate your input on that. She's like, you bet. And she just walked away. And I just thought about that for a minute around, like, I could have been like, what the fuck? Why are you giving me health advice? Right? Which is a natural reaction for me to have. Like, I'm a 34-year-old trainer that does all this, right? Let's play the cards, right? Or like, hey, all that told me was that she's trying to do a protein shake because she thinks it's good for her, right? Like, because she was like 75 years old, right? Like, that's a huge win for me, right? If I have to break down a 75-year-old woman trying to drink a protein shake to get more protein, that's a huge win. So changing expectations, managing the relationship with success, helping educate people to tell them like, hey, it's just a process, right? Like you might be helping people here, but just because you worked with Dr. Bo once and your ankle felt really good and it doesn't mean you can't get hurt again. Not because of anything other than like, hey, you just tripped, right? Like, and it's not your fault. It doesn't make you a bad person. Or hell, you know, how many people have lost the same 30 pounds 55 times, right? And that becomes like, and that's a conversation I have with all of my online clients, like to have that and like, hey, it's okay, right? Because here's the thing with the coach, and I think there's sometimes people go into having a coach as like a prideful thing, like I've got a trainer, they're gonna really kick my ass, and you're like, all right, that's kind of cool. And I used to buy into that shit when I was a 24-year-old, right? Because that's how people wanted to do it. And if that's what gets you going and being excited about fitness, because you have some 24-year-old kid who lifts a lot of weight, like is making you motivated, dope, right, fine. But it really is going to come down to like, hey, helping you make some better decisions. And you may never get under a barbell. I think changing the expectation for people to have those, right? And that's it, right? Is not having, it's accepting what's there and not having expectations, right? But just sharing what you can and giving people the opportunity to be successful. Because, you know, check out a guy named Andrew Deutsch. Andrew has a gym in LA, or had a gym in LA called Nerdstrom. Sorry, I know we're getting long. But Andrew comes from being a creative director at a tech firm. And he had a friend, he plays Dungeons and Dragons and loves like board games and fantasy worlds. And he had a friend that he really wanted to get into fitness. And his friend, you know, do the whole la thing, which all of us know, right, as fitness people. And she was like, hey, man, come over, we're going to play D&D, but we're going to work out first. All right. And Andrew, being a super creative dude, shout out Andrew Deutsch, big fan of yours. He like designs this cool ass workout, man. He's like, all right, man, we're going to go in the garage. And this guy's like a heavier person, not in shape. There's 5 goblins. To kill the goblins, you got to do 5 squats and 5 push-ups, right? After 25 minutes, 5 more goblins come out. And he created this super dope storyline experience. And so I ended up later teaching a workshop for Onnit at his gym in LA. And Andrew's in Hollywood. He's in Studio City. So he had all these artists from like Marvel and Harry Potter and all, like his gym was just all these beautiful flags and renditions. Because they have like, the end of the workout was, the finisher was 50 squats, 50 med ball slams, and 50 like what they call them superhero landings, but they're like split squats. But you just put your fist down to the ground. And they're like, that's what kills Lord Voldemort. And I'm like, dope. You got 40 people who probably would never have a relationship to go to the gym to do 30 minutes, 60 minutes of continuous exercise, doing progressive loading in a fun way that gets them excited to do it, right? Like, so to watch him build a whole community and gym around that was like, it was amazing. And to teach a workshop there and watch his trainers, like, like I mentioned, I come from being a hyper bro-y gym dude that like lifts weights and played sports. And, I'm super motivated by like not sucking. Right? Like, so I'm very much the dude, like, I'll put 5 more pounds in the bar just to prove I can squat the most than whoever's sitting here lifting right now. Right? Like, I'll very much be that dude, right? Because I come from being an undersized athlete that hit puberty late, that had to prove myself that I'm strong. Right? That's why I do it. But to be able to be in a position to help facilitate an experience and help facilitate how people interact with this journey that is their own journey of fat loss, weight loss, right? I think it's super, super important for all of us. And to be able to demystify that, hey, there's a lot of things out there, right? Like a lot of it's true, right? But we have to get good at dissecting it, right? Like that's why that NASM personal trainer at 24-hour fitness has more reach than you and I, because they're hustling different people than like you and I are in our spaces, right? Like you're working more in a medical setting or that kind of conversation. So it's like, that person who's got a bum sciatica that's going into ride the bike every day, that's doing whatever exercise they saw on IG, like they're seeing it from those Equinox and those 24-hour type fitness trainers. So I think it's helping them, which is what I'm trying to do. It's on your side, helping clinicians as well as patients understanding expectations around what's going to happen, what elicits change, right? Like we're finally coming there because all the wearables and tech and measuring stress that more isn't better, right? That was the old school method of like, well, you want to get better at shooting basketball? Exactly. Go shoot 100 more free throws. And then now we're discovering like, oh, actually more isn't better, right? And like that, people can play the research game, but like I tell people, I go, do you guys realize that like college athletes like football players wear GPS in their helmets and we're tracking how fast they run for how far and they're pulled off the field at X amount because we're trying to predict injuries? And they're like, what? I go, yep. Because I know if that defensive back, I only want him running 4 sprints today at his total velocity because I want to keep him fresh for Saturday, not beating up the receiver on a Wednesday, right? And it was like, that's the level of measurement. But like, that's for that person. For everyday people, we have to find ways of changing the conversation that makes them feel successful. That looks cool, right? Like, I should do GPS tracking. Like, no, you should walk 5,000 steps a day, drink more water, eat more protein, and move your body for 20 minutes a day. But that's too simplistic, right? So it has to get marketed sexy because people don't want to, like, you know what I mean? So that's why I think connecting to people on a level that gets them to like interact with, hey, here's what the thing I'm really trying to do. And that's why I lean so much into teaching coaches how to tell their story, because I'm not going to connect with a 13-year-old girl that's struggling with the way she feels about her body and food. If I'm put in a situation to coach her and now I'm getting to be a male coach role model and play that dynamic with that teenage girl, that's a very different coaching experience though than me trying to connect with her on what's going on in her body and her feeling. You know what I mean? So someone who's been a challenged 13-year-old girl with the way they feel about their body as a coach, and you don't have to be a 300 certs and 9,000 sessions PhD in exercise science to connect with that person, right? And once again, we mentioned like that person probably doesn't need dynamic effort back squats and conjugate programming. Is it great for that coach to go learn what overload means and mechanical stress is and how to create adaptation? For sure. But is that 13-year-old girl going to get a really good experience for a number of years, like goblet squatting, doing some basic band workouts and just developing a better relationship with themselves, right? Like that becomes the win. So it's hard because this influencer world has a lot of downfalls, but it has a lot of good things too. And so I think as professionals, all we can do is not worry about what other, like, and I'm really guilty of this. I get really pissy about watching what other people are doing and just like, oh my God, what kind of bullshit are you doing? Why? And then it's like, well, you're not putting out anything different, so there's nothing else to point it to. But you know what I mean? So I very much fall in like, you're not allowed to bitch about where things are unless you're willing to do something to help. And so it's tough, right? So I think that there's a number of things, and everybody's journey is so different, right? Like some people, like I fell into the barbell at 21, whereas some people don't fall into it till 30. Some people find group fitness or bodybuilding or whatever. And it doesn't really matter. Like, look at how many coaches, like how many beat up powerlifters are now mobility or technique coaches now, because like, I lifted like an asshole for like the first 9 years of my career. And now I'm teaching you how to deadlift correctly because my shoulders hurt. And that's a lot of them, right? And they'll all tell you that. So I think we're finally coming full circle. I think it really just comes down to working on finding authentic connections with people and helping people do something 1% better, right? Just one thing better. And if you're the person that helps them in that journey, right? Bo might be the person that helps you in your journey for this 6 years, 12 weeks, 1 day, one conversation, one podcast. Then it's me for a while. Like him and I have had those experiences with people, right? You have mentors that have carried you to here, and then you're here, and then you're here. And I think that's how, but fitness is so dogmatic, right? It's everybody standing on a pillar saying they're wrong, I'm right, that sucks, that's wrong. And the way everything is marketed as everything you knew about exercise science and fat loss and muscle growth has been wrong until now. And it's like, no, you're just showing me a different angle of doing a bicep curl with a dumbbell, right? Like it's the same elbow flexion activity. However, what you are bringing up is a great point that, hey, most of us can't externally rotate our forearm out. So if you're stuck in this neutral position and you're doing 1,000,000 curls without fully being able to move your elbow all the way into extension and flexion, overloading that joint tissue is probably going to feel like crap if you do a bunch of it and never rest it, right? Versus what if we were able to give you an elbow that rotates like an elbow should, that extends like an elbow should, and now we give you curl options. Your bicep's going to grow bigger, it's going to grow fuller, it's going to be in less pain, your shoulder's going to feel better, right? Like there's so many variables to it. But if we're all just bashing on here's the thing that they're doing, they suck, or here's what I'm doing works, right? Like I think that's been the one unique thing about, you know, my career wasn't set up to where I was trying to like go teach a cert or a workshop. It was really about, man, I'm taking all this education and it was just great. I love learning. I just love taking courses to learn. I was like, oh my God, I love to nerd out. And then to be like, oh, wow, okay, there's not this out there, right? Like people are having a hard time missing this. And then being like, well, I guess I can teach that better, or I can be in that position to teach that. So, you know, it's just, I wish there was a solid answer. I wish I could give you not a 20-minute answer on it's going to be this to fix things. But I want to encourage people to start their own journey, right? Like don't just stop at Dr. Bo or myself, like start hammering on the people that we follow, the information that we're following, and start digging in, right? Like, it's unfortunate that fitness is something that we all have to learn. It's not like a car, right? Like, think about learning how to work out is kind of like a really useful skill, right? Like, if you know how to work on your car, you know how to work on a piece of like appliance at your house, you can save yourself a lot of money over years, right? Fitness, same way. Learn a lot of useful skills, but like, it's not, you don't have, like, knowing how to work on your car isn't necessarily going to save your life. It might in a certain setting, right? Whereas like everybody kind of has to learn how to do fitness now, right? Like, it's an unfortunate setting that you have to learn how to manage your calories. You have to learn how to manage your energy. You have to learn how to manage your stress. You have to move in a structured way, because we don't do enough non-structured movement, right? If we were looking at our RMR, thermic effective food, our NEAT activities, and then exercise, right? Like, well, we don't do NEAT and we eat really poor amounts of calories, and we don't exercise. So the only thing we have is our RMR, and we're not adding more muscle, right? So if we're looking at it from that level, just a lot of unique things that we have to help people do. So it's just going to take a lot of people giving different messages, but it's going to take all of us coming together and not being dogmatic and saying, hey, that's not right. Because context is king and queen. I don't know what you're saying about that thing. I don't know, right? There's blatantly wrong information, trust me, but right, like, not jumping down each other's throats because we don't know what something is, right? And that makes the industry better, because I couldn't imagine being a consumer being so confused, right? Half the coaches are confused.
Yes. You just rambled for did you breathe, man? Did you breathe? That was good. I want to be respectful of your time. My wife's about to stab me if I don't get out of here too. So
You're good, man.
I'll just leave it as there are so many things in there I would have loved to jump in and everything. Unfortunately, the internet's not really allowing us to do that, but that's okay. I think there was a lot of awesome stuff in there. And yeah, let's before we jump off, let people know where they could find you at this point. If the best, I think it was sampogue.com, right? That was I looked around, and that seemed to be the best place, and the same on Instagram. But tell us where to go.
Yeah, SPOGUE86 on Instagram. I post pretty consistently there right now. I'm launching a mentorship on Sunday, March 7th. Weekly courses teaching you everything from exercise science, storytelling, building online products, content strategies, and how to run an online business. And I still have all the episodes of Fitness Break Room if you want to go back and search where podcasts are. And sampogue.com is where everything else is.
Dude, appreciate the energy,
Awesome.
Appreciate the time, appreciate what you're doing, helping people get better in one way or another. We're going to sign off. We'll talk to you all next